listeners. Welcome to the TasFarmers podcast. I'm Grace, and I'm head of communications. I'm manager for communications and member engagement at TasFarmers. And it's been another big fortnight across ag in Tasmania as I chase the microphone. Some big things are happening. Fuel and fertiliser still at the centre of everything we're talking about every day. We've also had some interesting movement on plant breeding technology. And in terms of the bigger picture, there was a roundtable strategy held on ag in Longford last week. But let me go around the table and introduce the team we have today. So today I'm joined by the politically astute Nathan Calman. Welcome, Nathan.
Good to be here.
Good to have you back. And our own Shakespeare, soon to be published author, Neil Grose.
Thank you, Grayson.
So I couldn't find anyone from the Renaissance period apart from the guy who wrote The Prince. I didn't think you'd want to be related to him. Machiavelli, yes. And returning from the dead, Ian Saw. No, just kidding. It is April 1. We have the new El Presidente and leader of the free world, Nathan Cox. Welcome back.
Thank you, Grayson.
Good to have you here. Well, I wanted to do a good old army thing. When you land into a bad zone, you say, what have we got and what do we need? Which leads us to a situation wrap. Neil, can you give us the picture right now? What's happening with fuel?
Well, at the moment we have supply in Tasmania. Price is an issue, and cost and price are probably two different things. We've seen an immediate impact for consumers at the Bowser with the federal government reducing the excise. So I note this afternoon driving in, or this morning rather, that diesel in some servos was below $3 a litre. And isn't it interesting the times we're in where below $3 a litre for diesel, you say, I saw some cheap fuel today.
But it's not stable is what I'm hearing you say?
It's not stable. And, farmers are worried about where this heads in the future. So we need some transparency around what future shipments look like, what quantities look like. But also we've been talking a lot with growers, particularly in my case with potato growers, around what diesel supply means for current harvest and current transport, but also what goes in the ground next, and that flows on into fertiliser availability and so on. But as we know, the country moves on diesel, and diesel supply, and we're all very, very anxious around diesel supply.
Yeah, Mr. President, our phone's rung hot. Journo's asking the question, what's your take from the ground, from what you're hearing and what you're experiencing on your own property?
Thanks, Grayson. I think what we're after is just some consistency of messaging. We're after certainty. We need a good handle on supply and a good handle on what our price is going to be. If we're going to budget for next year, we're going to budget to plant, maintain and harvest crops and work with livestock, transport things around the country and around the state, we need good certainty, solid certainty of supply and price.
So what farmers need right now is confidence and not just around price.
Absolutely.
Nathan, big announcement, just hot off the press. Albo's going to stand up. Is he going to give us good news, or you think it's steady the ship, don't panic?
It's probably only been a couple of days since his last announcement around fuel, so one would have to think that something must have changed dramatically if he's standing up again so soon. But, the 25 cents a litre cut in fuel earlier in the week was obviously welcomed by everybody that's struggling with cost of living, but one must also be concerned that when we know that there's a demand cliff coming that we're not going to be able to meet, at some point, encouraging people to buy more of something that we don't have enough of is only going to end in tears, unfortunately. And I think what we will need to see, unless something dramatic changes sooner rather than later, is, that leadership of how do we make sure that farmers have the certainty they need to not just get this year's crops out of the ground, but to plant next year's. Because without making that call, in 12 months' time, we might be all sitting around going, we've, potentially got no fuel to bring food into the country because our farmers didn't plant anything this time last year.
Yeah, and that's the key challenge. It's, yes, we do have, I'm reluctant to call it a crisis, but we do have a very concerning situation right at the moment. But the tail on that dog is very, very long. And if we don't do a range of things right now, and if we don't have the confidence to do replanting, resowing, refertilising, refurbishing soils so that they are in good condition to grow the next crop, then the lag for that is going to bite us on the proverbial backside for a long time to come, particularly when, if you think about the very, very pessimistic situation where this country will need to be reliant on its own food production and moving that food around. We can't rely on cheap stuff coming in from overseas because it's got as much trouble getting here as oil.
What happens to my potato price when I go to the checkout? What's it going to mean ultimately for the very end of the chain, Nathan?
Well, I think at some point those commodity prices need to go north. It's going to squeeze us at the production end. It's going to squeeze the transport. It's going to squeeze processing. All that diesel and fertiliser and anything else we're chasing, the price of that is going to go up. Everything's going to get squeezed, and I'm sorry, but the consumers might see that at the supermarket. It might be unwelcome, but farmers aren't charities.
You've called for quarantining in some of these interviews. What's that going to look like in your mind when we get to that stage?
I think ring fencing, quarantining, rationing. I'm happy to stand behind fire trucks and ambulances in line for my fuel, but I think that agriculture, getting food to people and food out of the ground, will be a very, very close second in priorities.
And you alluded to fertiliser, Neil. We've had no news that last week the last shipment had probably hit Tassie for a while.
Yep.
The NFF had some meetings. I hear rumours of a new task force being set up by the federal government.
Yeah.
What's your take?
Yeah, I sat in on the NFF fertiliser meeting yesterday, which was quite illuminating. I think they've had some good discussions with government at the federal level around other options for particularly nitrate fertiliser. We've certainly hit the wall when it comes to urea. I spoke with a grower last night at a committee meeting. He'd managed to get urea at around about $1,700 a tonne. But there was, as I understand it, there was no more. So bear in mind we were paying $650 a tonne in October. But out of that NFF meeting, they were suggesting alternative ways of getting nitrogen, particularly ammonia nitrate, which many people would see as quite a volatile mix, but also other byproducts out of China, which have got nitrogen in them, which is a byproduct out of the nylon industry, which is concerning. I mean, do we want to put byproducts out of industrial processes out of China on our beautiful red soils to grow crops? I mean, we probably have the sovereign capability in this country to make urea here and all our fertilisers, but we don't. And this is probably one of those calls to action where, yes, it's going to be tough for the next 6 months, but we do need that reset in that direction.
Well, unless anyone else has any happy news to add around fuel and fertiliser, we might go on to some happy news. Nathan Calman, we've had an announcement today by the government on plant breeding technology. It's very technical. What does it all mean? Are we going to be splicing hardy frogs with corn to get a new species of corn, or
is that one that walks its way to market?
Yeah, it's very, very hardy when it comes to rain and flooding.
Definitely not, Grayson, I think is the key point there. So today's announcement, I think, is a really good and exciting thing. And I know we'll talk about the ag strategy into the future, but it's a sign that I think government has listened to industry around the things that it needs to become more productive in, the activities that occur on farm. the SDN1 technology basically just speeds up nature's own processes by enabling plant breeders to turn genes that were already present in that organism's DNA on or off to get the outcome that you want in the field. We're not talking about, cutting a gene out of a fish and putting it into a mushroom. Far from it. This, isn't classified as a GMO. So it doesn't affect the state's moratorium on that sort of technology, which I think many producers would have huge concerns with. But what it does do is actually enable Tasmania to actually use, new varieties that have already been bred into state. We know that this is important for dairying, it's important for poppies, it's important for a lot of other seed crops that, people are looking to have grown and produced in Tasmania and up until now haven't been able to. So, it will boost productivity on farm, and that's only a good thing.
Particularly with crops like canola and so on, where, I think I've said before, 90% of our canola goes to Europe to be turned into biodiesel. If we can grow more efficient crops of canola here, why can't we turn our canola into biodiesel here?
Well, we certainly need some sort of a fuel solution. Do we think people are going to understand this, Nathan? Is it, it's already hard to explain in some ways that you're not spicing a fish with a mushroom. I appreciate the metaphor.
Is that fish Wellington?
Put your fish straight into the oven and you come out with one. So is the market going to understand what's happening in Tasmania, or do you think they're going to confuse it?
I think that this is a story that we can talk positively about. We can continue to say that, Tasmania has a moratorium on GMOs. We still do. However, what we can also talk to is that, our farmers are becoming more and more productive as they need to be to actually, where they can, in some cases, shelter producers from consumers from higher costs by doing things more effectively.
So no pushback from consumers or from
No,
large organisations?
I don't think so.
No, it's just one of those great positives. This is where technology and productivity should be taking us.
And our committees have been working hard on that?
Yeah, no, we put in a significant submission to government when they were doing their review last year. Our councils and committees have probably been chomping at the bit for this change for some time. So I think, good on the government. Change couldn't have happened soon enough.
Well, from gene technology, fuel and fertiliser and being kept in the dark like a mushroom, last week the future strategy for ag held down the road here in Longford. Nathan, can you set the scene on what the discussion was about at the round table?
Yeah, so I guess at a high level, we already had the agri-growth strategy for the state, which is to get to $10 billion at the farm gate by 2050. We've been sitting ahead of that growth curve now for a little while, but what this strategy was supposed to do was bring together a lot of key players and actually look at how are we going to get to the target, not what is the target so that we all know what direction we're heading in, but how fast as an industry we can actually run to get there. So, it did the classic, what are our strengths as an industry? What can we do better? And, we spoke a lot about how irrigation, for example, has really improved productivity within the farm. And then an opportunity is to do that further. But then if you were looking at weaknesses and threats, we start talking about how our state's GBEs can slow us down and put up barriers that don't need to be there, or that the federal government appears to want to put on ice any plans to invest in future irrigation schemes within the state. So it was about understanding at a very broad level, what are all the things that we are already doing well that we can do more of? What are the barriers we need to overcome? And I think we'll come out of that with a really healthy document that doesn't just tell us where we're heading, but, maybe gives us the waypoints to get there as quickly and efficiently as possible.
You mentioned the $10 billion goal, and I know it's not necessarily about reaching a target per se, more about how we go about it and get there. But if I look at the data, it would look like we're needing to double our output to get there. So can we really actually achieve that level of growth?
Absolutely. I mean, we still have a number of Tranche 3 irrigation schemes that are in construction or about to start at the moment. That'll probably get us about halfway there. But I think announcements like the SDN1 technology this week, they play a role in that. And, there was a lot of discussion as well about it needing to be, whilst focused on inside the farm gate, acknowledging that outside the farm gate, we actually need value-adding industries here in the state knocking on your door going, we want you to grow this for us so that we can be successful in the state. And, I've always passionately said $1 at the farm gate should be at least $10 when it goes on a boat to feed somebody somewhere else. If we can do both those things, I think, our state has a huge future ahead in terms of not just supplying bulk commodities, but actually feeding the nation with high-value food products.
That's one of the great positives around Tasmania where we're at the moment. I know we're quite worried about the current situation we're in, but overall the long-term future for Tasmanian agriculture is extraordinarily buoyant when you think of soils and waters and technology and all the things you're talking about. There's a lot to be really excited about around where we're heading.
But it's great to look to the horizon, but if we're doing a little bit of risk management, what happens if we don't get there?
Well, we have to get there, Grayson.
We have to get there, Neil.
Well, there is no alternative.
Well, one of the big problems I can see going through some of the information is I feel like irrigation's hit a bit of a ceiling. So, with that sort of work slowing and the expansion of our irrigation scheme slowing, what other levers do we have? Technology we've mentioned.
Research is a big one. There's plenty of opportunities to do producer-focused research. Research that producers need, research that helps with improvements to yield and to crop maintenance, research that helps reduce cost, reduce inputs, reset perhaps some of the agronomy that's been taken for granted and get producers back on very low input programs. We're seeing that with the dairy programs, the research programs at Elliott, reducing nitrogen input and seeing the results from that.
Yeah, R&D's always pivotal at the start. But is there a gap there between research versus adoption? What was the feeling in the room? I know the university were in the room. Is the research translating to real outcomes or not?
Depends on the research. Some of the research, there was a comment made that some of the research is perhaps research for research's sake, research that would lead to other research, and there's research that leads to adoption. And I think the focus needs to be on research that has direct benefit to producers, which will almost certainly enable adoption.
Well, that's very interesting. So if we've got research for the sake of research, who's accountable for really fixing it?
Well, it's all important. It's just what's more important at any point in time.
It's just that old question, what problem are we seeking to solve? So if you're going to research saying we need to fix a problem, might be pink rot, might be whatever, then that research will be really fixed and targeted towards that end result. If you're doing research which is, well, I wonder what if, I mean, that's great and fun and all that sort of thing, but it's not driven, it's not targeted. You end up in the situation which Nathan was just talking about, where that piece of research leads into the next piece of research, which leads into the next government grant. And thank you very much. And all that stuff is interesting and great. But unless it drives the agricultural ship faster and we catch more wind in the sail that we've got, then you question sometimes whether that's the best value for money or value for research dollar, which is always hard to come by.
Absolutely. I think that the research that's done is all valuable. It's just that sometimes we need to focus really hard, particularly at the moment, on how to get our input costs down and start to widen the margins for producers again.
When we talk value, obviously we're chasing value in terms of our commodity and improving it, and research does that. But being a commodity, there's also this tension with getting your volume up. Are we still chasing scale, or are we pivoting to a premium value in that strategy?
Depends a lot on what you're doing. Like if you're talking about French fry potatoes, you're talking about volume and scale. No one heads to McDonald's or Hungry Jack's for 5-star cuisine. They're looking for a quick feed or something which it ticks the box. But the value add stuff, like you think about Tasmanian dairy products and cheese and our beef and lamb products, then that is value. So how can we increase the value back to that product, and more importantly, back to the person who grew it, back to the farm that grew it, through branding, through all those sort of things.
I mean, you've always got to acknowledge that our biggest Achilles heel as an island state is freight across the most expensive stretch of water probably in the world. And to actually, get enough of a return from what you're growing, it has to be high value and it has to be branded as Tasmanian, because people will pay more for it, but it actually means you can afford to continue doing on your property what you've always done in a more and more effective way. So
I think that, and the Tasmanian wine industry is a classic example of that, where it could be Victorian wine, but it is Tasmanian wine. That brings with it a premium and a certain resilience to other headwinds. Like on the mainland, the wine industry has an absolute glut of wine. Yet Tasmania, we're still producing more wine, but it is still at a high value because it's Tasmanian, it's high quality and has that high value. And the same with Cape Grim beef and King Island cheese and all those sort of things. They are sought after because of the brand and that unique Tasmanian aspect which they bring. Like you go and buy a bag of onions in a supermarket in Sydney and they're probably Tasmanian onions, but you wouldn't know probably, and all you really want's an onion. But if you're going to buy good quality lamb, then you want Tasmanian lamb.
Well, Tasmanian product is certainly Rapunzel in the castle on this little island of ours. Nathan, you mentioned freight. Freight's one of the big ones.
Rapunzel in the castle, where did that come from?
I have no idea. I was thinking about blonde hair, I think. And what's in my potato fries sometimes at McDonald's when they're not wearing hairnets, obviously. I am after a gourmet experience, Neil. But when does freight stop becoming a policy issue, becoming a competitive crisis? I mean, if we can't compete with stuff coming out of Europe, there was another big announcement last week, which maybe we can touch on at the end. But they're subsidised. We've also then got a piece of water. What was the structural reform talked about? Well, we've already done a lot of work at TasFarmers, lobbying the Australian government for a change in the TFIS scheme. But what were they talking about in the room?
There was actually a lot of discussion, and I'll get to the answer of your question at the end of this, I think, around one of the biggest things that government can do, aside from writing checks to help fix problems that need investment, is actually making sure that the bureaucracy stays out of industry's way as much as possible. And that goes for our GBEs, not just departments. Because at the moment, one of the biggest things that cools down investment and growth and our ability to hit that farm gate target is people losing confidence because it's taking 3 or 4 years to get a planning application approved. Or, the price to actually pump water onto your crops is going through the roof because we haven't shielded producers from the costs associated with Project Marinus. And I think when we started talking about the issue of Bass Strait, there was a lot of discussion about, how do we actually empower, TasPorts and TT Line in this case to not be benchmarking how much they can charge to provide a service whilst still being competitive with the natural market, but how low a price could we actually charge for providing an efficient service that then means producers have more confidence because they know they're going to be able to get their goods to market on time and for the lowest possible cost. And I think when you think about why a lot of our GBEs were established, it was to help create advantage for Tasmanians. Whereas I think at the moment, benchmarking is very, very focused on returns for Treasury. And that can often mean that when you've got multiple, examples of those pressures, then adding costs to a producer's overheads, their confidence to invest just disappears. So from a freight perspective, I think that discussion was quite enlightening from a lot of people around the various challenges that they see from a freight perspective and what government could do without maybe having to spend a cent.
It's a really interesting perspective on that Treasury desire to see their state-owned companies return that dividend. And I guess that's changed the whole way that business is done in Tasmania, particularly when you think about hydro, whose initial charter was to provide low-cost energy to Tasmania to encourage development within Tasmania. Now it seems like that imperative is now to deliver the highest possible return back to Treasury.
Couldn't agree more.
That water also causes supply chain vulnerability. It can include fertiliser and packaging. Was there any talk of ways to de-risk the system and reduce more costs?
Sovereign capacity is always a way to de-risk the system. It is going to cost more. We hope it wouldn't cost substantially more, but homegrown fertiliser, homegrown fuel would be a really positive way to make sure that we've got sovereign risk management in place.
A national policy, not just a state-led one?
Yep.
That sovereign capability, like when you think about the last time there was a massive shock in the world, which I guess was the Second World War. So after the Second World War, Australia made almost nothing. We only had one fuel refinery in the country, but then through the late 40s, the 50s, 60s and 70s, we developed manufacturing in this country where we were pretty much sovereignly capable. That's a terrible way to put it, but we made everything we needed. We made cars, we made machinery, we made fertiliser, we did all our own fuel, we made our own clothes, we grew our own food, and we exported surplus. But through the 90s and into the 2000s, we pretty much shifted all that capability offshore to the point now where we have 2 refineries, we have no vehicle manufacturing, we don't make white goods, we make very few clothes. We grow a lot of food. We grow an enormous amount of food, but the supply chains but the risk from the overseas imports, which are now cheaper and cheaper, now also threaten our sovereign capability. And at some stage, there needs to be that reset where we start making stuff in this country again, because we have shown ourselves to be so horrendously exposed in times like this.
Post-war, it was labour. What are the constraints now on the Australian economy?
Well, I mean, after the Second World War, the main currency for development was labour, like bringing people into the country who could build things like the Snowy Mountain scheme, like the hydroelectric scheme behind us up here on top of the Western Tiers. These days, the currency for economic development is technology, and pretty much the monopoly on technology and the means for that technology now resides in China. And if you want the technology out of China, if they think you're going to be competitive against them, then it struggles to get it. And that was one of the things which held back the hydrogen industry in Australia at a micro level. You just couldn't get the gear out to make it.
Labour's still going to be important on farm and is in many ways still considered a limiting factor. Why isn't it treated as number one for constant growth?
That's a good question. We all see that the labour market as it is. We've got, I think it's 6 positions for every agricultural qualification in Australia. The demand is there for labour. There's just an issue with supply somewhere, whether it's people don't see agriculture as a great career, which everyone in this room realises and knows, and some of us have proven it's a really substantial career and really satisfying and fulfilling. But we need more marketing around agriculture. We want it to be as interesting and as dynamically advertised as and marketed as defence and construction, and have the education systems to go with it.
You're, like I say, massively involved in the setting up of the skills criteria is not quite the right word. Curriculum is the word I'm looking for. Just how is that going with the federal government setting up a career pathway similar to trades?
So we're looking at setting up an agricultural trades apprenticeship. It's been through its feasibility study, really positive, really well received by industry. We're at the point now where we are about to start actually building that qualification. So looking at what skills will be in there, what skills industry expect, what skills can be delivered, and to some point more so than in the past with agricultural qualifications, how those skills will be delivered.
You had educators in the room, you had industry. What were they thinking around the table, Nathan?
On a skills front, I think one of the biggest challenges we have there is that people think if you're not born into a farming family, you can't be part of the industry, where nothing is really further from the truth. And I think the minister acknowledged as well that there are lots of other industries that are doing a really, really good job of coordinating a person's career for the length of their career, from the time they leave school to the time they retire, to keep them within that profession. And we're just not doing that well in agriculture. So I think there's a serious need for career mentorship in agriculture to help people before they leave school be attracted to a career. But then as they grow and develop and maybe have different changing interests around how they can remain in the sector, that we help them with that, because there's classic examples around defence or building and construction where, people are actively supported for the length of their career, and we should be doing the same for ag.
One of the bigger constraints that we've talked about a lot at TasFarmers, and talking about GBEs, this came up as well. When we expect people to move out into the region to work on farms, they're looking for a package generally that would include accommodation. GBEs and councils tend to get in the road with a lot of those proposals. It's just time that a lot of those planning issues disappeared or were made disappear, so that farmers could provide accommodation to entice people out into the regions and work on our farms, and therefore lift our productivity.
Well, investment on farm. And, we're helping with the housing crisis, which still exists and doesn't appear to be getting any better. Ian will ring me shortly after this podcast, not just to complain because he's returning, but also, when we talk investment, Rushy Lagoon, still all silent out there, listeners. We don't really know what's going on. We hope there's an update on the FIRB website soon. But how do we balance attracting capital, maintaining local control, where if it shifts away, we end up where we are now? How do we balance attracting capital with local control?
I think in the case of Rushy Lagoon, we go back to that point of making sure that markets aren't being artificially manipulated. That's our primary concern with what we believe is going on at Rushy Lagoon. It's that, money from outside a market is artificially pumping up the price of that land to the point where locals can't, bid in a fair way and, then operate on a level playing field. It's a big, big risk.
And Rushy is a classic example of what we were just talking about. There is a prime opportunity to bring 10 new farmers into agriculture on some pretty good land up through there. There's some rubbish on Rushy Lagoon, but there's some very, very, very good grazing type soils and a huge amount of land where, if it could be split into 4,000 acre blocks, and there's an opportunity for young farmers to get in and learn their trade and make some money and grow their farming business, but more importantly, grow farming in that community out there. But we just fear that, what you were saying, Nathan, is that, interference by the clean energy, whatever they are, the investment arm of that, artificially inflates land. And then, again, it makes it just harder and harder for people to get in and stay in farming.
Where does the Future Ag strategy go on investment? What areas was it looking to encourage, or did it have was there a flavour in there at all, or is it being parked and thought about more long term to come back to?
I mean, a classic from a government perspective that we must continue to do, continue to invest in irrigation schemes. Like, that's a 50-50 partnership between state and the federal government. And 50% of the state comes from a producer. But you can guarantee that for every dollar invested in getting water to the farmer's gate, it will at least be matched on-farm, in on-farm capital to distribute, pump that water, put high-value crops in the ground that then employ more local people, enables new shops to open in the main street, bolsters class size numbers in regional communities. Like, it unlocks everything. And I think that's probably why it's both surprising and concerning that commitment seemed to have just been put on the back burner in recent announcements federally.
Do these opportunities offer us more vertical integration when we look at the Tamar scheme, and on the east, if we get water down to Georgetown and Bell Bay, surely there's more opportunity, and it feeds the irrigation systems as well now.
Well, nothing ever went backwards by supplying water. So, the opportunity with the Tamar scheme, there is the industrial side of it. And I know the headline was around hydrogen, and I was heavily involved in that at the start. I mean, I think the hydrogen unicorn has disappeared over the horizon, but having good quality, reliable, high volume industrial water available at Bell Bay is probably one of the best investments in Tasmania's industrial future you could make. Because at the moment, that's the only constraint at Bell Bay is there's no hot, not enough industrial water. I mean, there's potable water there, but you don't want to be using drinking water to use with industry. But if the agricultural industry can also leverage off that and irrigate into areas which are just crying out for development, and I'm thinking, down the Pipers Valley and Pipers Brook and off into Corolla and other parts of Lilydale and places which Nathan and I know very well, the opportunity to develop agriculture all the way through there is immense, and most of it is within 30 to 40 minutes of Launceston. So here's an opportunity to introduce, a city of 150,000 people to agriculture and intensive agriculture close to town, where it does open up those agricultural careers without having to relocate hours from what you like to do. So it's an immense opportunity, not just to grow agriculture, but to grow the entire business community, but also the community across the north. And it's incredibly frustrating where we just can't get this across the line. Like, it makes sense. Like in the words of Sam Kekovich, it makes sense.
Alongside that irrigation comes R&D, extension, investment in people in those regional communities. There's a lot of real exciting potential for government investment in those places and in those people and communities. And I just think by scaling back irrigation, we don't get the opportunity to make those other investments that just build and build and build on that one single big investment.
And the beauty of driving industrial water to somewhere like Bell Bay is that it's a brownfield site which is just ripe for development for downstream agricultural processing. So if ever, you wanted to build a new abattoir in Tasmania, or a new vegetable processing in Tasmania, or a new flour mill, you would logically put it at Bell Bay, because you have industrial land, you have power, you have water, you have a skilled workforce nearby, and you have a deep water port with a rail link and a beautiful road courtesy of the failed pulp mill. Like, it's just, there's the Christmas present. It's already wrapped up for you.
Tick, 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 tick.
Yep, and we all get a tick because it never happens.
You forgot to mention the deep water port as well.
I think I got that in.
Oh, you did?
A few decent snapper out in front there as well at different times.
We've just talked about the immediate pressures in today's show, a little bit about the long-term strategy for ag, where the pain points are, and really how we can improve, and probably some big ideas, Neil. But before we finish up, as always, we just want to go around the table, see what's keeping us up at night. Nathan, yours is a long list.
Yeah, it is a long list at the moment. We've probably spoken about a lot of it again today, but maybe we'll just wait and see what Alvo is going to tell us at 7 o'clock tonight, and hopefully it's some good news. We'll wait and see.
Well, I'll probably be getting fast news out and having one in the background. Hopefully I don't miss the detail. Nathan, Mr. President, your days have changed, I imagine. There's be a few things that now starting to keep you awake.
Oh, obviously my nights have changed. Not quite as much sleep as I used to get. What I'd like to think was keeping me awake at night would be a sustained level of confidence out there amongst our growers. But I think with uncertainty that we're seeing around fuel, fertiliser and a lot of other things, the rising input costs, I think what we're seeing is a real need for producers to get a grip on their budgeting, on their gross margins. Looking out 2 to 3 years, we're not quite sure where interest rates will go either. So I think to be able to find someone that's really good on a spreadsheet, go and work with your accountant and your bank and get your budgets in place, do some sensitivity analysis in case things move too much. I think will pay dividends in the end. You won't run into any shocks. There's a range of support services out there too. If people are struggling, you've got Rural Alive and Well and Rural Business Tas. And of course, you've got TasFarmers who are more than willing to help and assist and signpost any way we can.
Yeah, absolutely. We will absolutely help you if you ring the office and point you in the right direction if we can't help you. So it's really about farmers keeping an eye on those fuel and fertiliser costs and doing a bit of analysis in the markets they're in and being aware that there are support services, business support services, mental health, and the red tape and special interests. That's what we're here to help you with, guys out there and girls. Neil, is this a Scott Morrison COVID moment, or is the PM going to stand up and deliver a message of confidence? What's your gut feeling, and what else is going to be keeping you up at night after you listen to that?
Well, the first thing the Prime Minister should be doing is telling us exactly how it is, and then hopefully articulating a plan to deal with that. So
he shouldn't stand up and say everything's okay?
Well, if everything is okay, then he should stand up and tell us that it is okay, but he should also stand up and tell us why it's okay. But if it's not okay, then we want to know what the federal government, along with industry bodies like ours, can do to help and can do to just get through this dip and then over, the coming months. Because even if this funny old war in the Middle East stopped tomorrow, the lag for that is months upon months upon months. I'll tell you what keeps me awake when I hear things. When I wake up this morning and open up the Australian, and it says that the Americans are happy to end the war without securing the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and then say to their alleged allies, "Well, we've done the hard work. You can either go and get the oil yourself, or you can buy it from us." And you just think, surely this is not all about selling American and Venezuelan oil through Donald Trump. If it's come to that, then the world has got some serious issues to deal with. Now, I'm sure it won't come to that, but it does keep me awake at night, particularly when you think about how far out fuel is planned to come into Australia. So fuel coming out of those 3 Asian countries is coming out, but what's going in? Where's the crude oil going? Where's the crude oil coming from to go in there? That's what keeps me awake, because that's not just an agricultural issue, that's an Australian issue.
Well, it's been another big podcast. Thank you. Thank you to our members, of course. Everything you do helps us. And to TasBuilt and Telstra, thanks to them, they help us make it happen. Till next week, team.
Or the week after.
Take care.
Absolutely.